you kind of go back and forth and you're just wasting time and money. And if you're not briefed well, you do a bunch of phone calls and meetings, right? You're just going back and forth constantly. And it really does feel like this guessing game of like, well, is this what you want? No, we don't like that. Okay, well, what are you looking for? I'm not sure yet.
What constitutes a good story? How do you begin the process of telling a good story? In the outdoor industry, the word story gets thrown around a lot. And in my opinion, I don't know that it's an accurate use of the word 90% of the time. From my perspective, a good story does two things. Number one, it's a communication vessel. And number two, it has to leave an emotional response with your intended audience. Think back to all the times you've been in a marketing meeting and the word story gets brought up. If you think about the end deliverables, the end products that were created, how many of them actually left your audience with an emotional response? If it didn't, I'd question whether the story being told was told well. In this upcoming 4-part series, we're going to dive into the process of how to tell good stories. We're going to talk about the elements of a story. We're going to talk about how to better understand your audience in order to tell a story that they'll resonate with, that they'll enjoy. We're going to talk about how to develop insights and using informed observations and insights to help tell powerful and meaningful stories for your intended audience. And lastly, once you have the vision for your story, we're going to talk about how do you communicate that to a creative team? How do you bring on partners and team members in order to execute on this vision? So if you're interested, if you want to geek out about stories, you'll definitely want to tune in to these next 4 episodes. We've got some amazing industry veterans coming onto the show to share their expertise, to share their insight. So if this series sounds awesome, you might want to actually go back to the first episode because this is episode 4 of 4. Welcome to the Backcountry Marketing Podcast. My name is Cole Heilborn. Today I'm sitting down with Evan Swinehart. He is one of the directors and partners over at Lumenati Productions. Evan, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. How are you doing, Cole?
Fantastic. Yeah, really looking forward to this conversation today. Where are you calling in from?
So right now I am in Denver, Colorado in our warehouse. It's about a 24,000 square foot warehouse, and it's kind of like a little bit of a fun factory here. We've got a production company, a software company, a skate park, a tattoo shop. So we do a lot of different things here. So kind of like this creative warehouse that we get to hang out in all day.
When you show up for work every day, do you kind of forget where you're supposed to go? You're like, well, I could get a tattoo, or I could go to the skate park, or I could sit at my desk.
Sometimes it's more that there's like probably more dogs here than employees. So it's like getting bombarded by the dogs and saying my hellos to all of them before I venture over to my little space.
Nice. Well, Evan, as you know, we're continuing this conversation. It's a 4-part series. We're talking all about the creative process. And to recap, if folks haven't been tuning in to this series is all about, we all want to tell great stories. We all want to make great creative projects, whether that's film project, graphic design assets, or even in-person activations. But as we've been discussing on this series, to get to the point where you can launch a great project, it takes a ton of work up front in order to actually get to the point where, in your case, you can bring cameras out and start to roll and start to capture footage. We've been talking about, why is story so important? Why do we all love stories? Why are stories things that we all try to tell and make? We've been looking at how to take data and understand your audience and understand analytics. And from that, then we've been looking at how do you take those ideas and develop insights and really quality nuggets of information that you can use to then develop creative that speaks to that particular audience. And Evan, you're kind of the last conversation in this series where we're now looking at, okay, how do we take everything that we've learned in these last few conversations and package it and get it ready to, bring into your case production. And so what we're going to be talking about is the importance of the creative brief and what it does, what it doesn't do, and kind of your experiences when you're working with clients developing briefs. I know that was a lot, but I'd love, Evan, if you could just, before we jump in, could you give us kind of the quick background on Lumenati? You guys do some really rad work in the industry. How long have you been doing this?
I've been at Lumenati since we started in 2014, 2015. But I've been doing basically production or some sort of video content creation since high school. That's kind of where I got into it. So yeah, early 2000s, I guess to date myself, is kind of when I've been into it. But yeah, Lumenati started in 2015, started with about four employees. It's kind of interesting because none of us really knew each other that well. We had all just kind of worked with each other as different freelancers in some capacity. Like one of my partners was a graphic designer who I just worked with a bunch, and we met kind of in the agency world, and we all just decided to start a business together. And now we're, man, with all the different businesses in here, we're probably 30 some employees. So it's been an awesome journey.
That's an impressive trust exercise to just start a business with four people that you sort of know.
Yeah, no, it couldn't have worked out better. It's so interesting because we're all completely different personalities, but it's been exciting because we're all so different. And I think, as a freelance kind of like filmmaker, director, whatever you want to call it, one-man band, and trying to start kind of like my own thing in the past, it just never really took off. And I think there's a big, it's hard to kind of be like, hey, I'm going to be, DP, director, producer, and run a business at the same time. So these four partners, like we all had kind of our own niche, right? So like one of them's running the business, one of them's seeing big picture, and then one of my partners is like another kind of creative and director. So him and I worked really closely, but like we don't have to mess with the business side. We're not like in the numbers. We're just focused on the creative. And I think that really kind of helped us take off. They're kind of worrying about how to move the business forward, what kind of moves we can make from like, big picture and finances. And then Brad, who's an awesome director here at Lumenati, we're just focused on like the creative and like trying to make cool shit.
Nice. The stuff that everyone wants to do.
Yeah, exactly.
Tell us a little bit about some of the work that you guys do.
Yeah, for sure. So we're kind of in like, I would say like commercial branded content. We do a lot of stuff I'm being in Colorado, right? It's kind of funny because you kind of get, especially as a director, right? You get these labels like, okay, you're the food guy, you're the product guy. Being in Colorado, obviously, like I kind of got labeled as like the outdoor guy. But I went to film school and like to think that I'm like fluent in the language of cinema. So, trying to do a bunch of different stuff. But we do a lot of different commercials for, software companies, different products, clothing lines, but we do a ton in the outdoor space as well. Just finished a commercial spot for Arapahoe Basin, a local ski area here, which was really fun. Gearing up for a running shoe company, and that seems to be my niche, is a lot of running and mountain biking. But then I seem to do a ton of bank spots and financial spots. I'm gearing up for a credit union spot. But that's what I love about this industry, right? Is I like taking things I learned from like a mountain bike shoe, and then how can I apply that to a bank commercial, and how we move the camera in a really cool way to try to, up that creative a little bit from just the things that we always see. I always try to find at least one thing to make a spot cool. Maybe if the creative's not exactly what you want, I always try to focus on like, all right, what can I get out of this? What is something I haven't tried that maybe I could put towards this script or whatnot? So I think that's what's so much fun about what we do every day.
So let's talk a little bit about how you guys typically work with clients. You work direct to brand, you also work with agencies, but just for maybe folks who aren't familiar kind of with the production side of the world, where do you get brought into a project typically, and what services are you providing for someone? Because I think this will kind of set the stage for what we're going to get into in a little bit.
Okay, so typically Lumenati will get brought in when a client, feels like they are ready to do a commercial or some piece of content and put it out into the world. And then we have a sales team at Lumenati as well, so they're also kind of going out and they'll hit up people, and sometimes that'll lead right from a cold call, and that'll be kind of we call it like a discovery call, and we'll have an executive producer and that salesperson, whoever got that lead or maybe had that contact, and they kind of just run them through trying to figure out like what the brand's needs are and what they want, and really understanding what the ask is. And sometimes it's super laid out and like we know exactly what we want to do, and then sometimes it's basically like, hey, we want a commercial. How much does that cost? And we're like, well, it's not that easy. We have to do a lot more digging. And then I will get brought in after like a lot of those issues, or not issues, a lot of those kind of brand communication and whatnot has been figured out. And then I'll meet with the brand and start to like go through a brief and figure out exactly what the brand's trying to communicate, and then how we can stylistically bring it to life in an interesting way.
Gotcha. So is Lumenati typically developing a brief, or are briefs handed to you from the client or agency? Maybe it's a mix of both.
It's totally a mix of both. Lots of times, right? So agencies, right? It's kind of like they've got it pretty figured out, and it's a brief, and lots of times it's script, storyboards, and everything. Or lots of times it's just a script and that's it, and there's not even any visuals to it. So it's coming up with all the visuals. But a lot, what I'm finding is with direct to brand, it's we're sending them the brief, and kind of working with them to figure out exactly what they're trying to communicate.
Gotcha. Interesting. So in your mind, I think the word brief gets thrown around a lot.
Yeah.
How would you, in your world, how do you define a brief? Because I think it does change depending on what sector you're in. But in the film world, what does it mean to you?
I think a brief, right, it's really a roadmap to success for a great production and finished product. Most importantly, it's communicating what you're trying to say, like what is your end goal. But then it's a lot more nuanced with like, budget, timeline, deliverables. Are there examples for like inspiration and style? But it's just like, what are you trying to say as a brand or convey, in this commercial?
Gotcha. So let's dig a little deeper there. You mentioned you talk about the goal of the brief. How important is that goal, and how important is like truly understanding what the point of this project is from your perspective?
Yeah, so it's huge, right? And I need like a ton of information. I'm not very smart, so like I need everything you can give me, I will take and just start to kind of sift through it. So, I prefer not to be brief in a brief. Like I want as much information as you can give me, and then it's really trying to figure out what your goal is, but then also do it in a simple way. I think what happens a lot is it gets overcomplicated and you're trying to say too much, right? You're like, we want the product to like show that it can do this, 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 and that. Where I'm like, let's just focus on one value proposition, right? Like, what do you really want to convey in this? And maybe it's like the functionality of it or the customization of a product. And I was like, all right, let's focus there, because you tend to then like try to say too much, right? And you're just not really being clear with what your end goal is. So I think that's like a really big thing, is just trying to be way more simple with your message and just focus on one kind of value prop or message and do that really, really well. I think another thing is like, we are storytellers, right? So every good story has a problem, right? And it's basically setting up the problem that your brand is solving for people as well, and making sure that's really clear, right? Like, okay, we're shooting for X shoe company. This shoe has max cushion and it will help your knees, and it gives you max comfort. We really need to focus on like conveying that in the final piece, that like this spot will, make your running career last a lot longer because it's max cushion and saves your knees, saves your joints, etc. So I think like trying to identify like what problem you're solving for people, and then like what is the end goal? Are you wanting people to? Is this just like product and you're just wanting like purchase? You want people just to like basically click and buy, or you looking for audience engagement, trying to build a brand, and can you do both as well? And I think if you think through how your shoot's going to go and what your deliverables are, and kind of like this hierarchy of deliverables, I really think you can do both. I think you can build a brand and get direct sales at the same time through cut downs and targeted ads and whatnot.
So definitely, yeah, I want to dive in a little bit more there. We were talking about deliverables and hierarchy, but before that, I want to go back to something you said earlier. You're talking about simplifying the goal and the importance of simplifying the goal. And I don't know if you've ever experienced this, but sometimes when clients come to us, they have, as you said, 3 or 5 different things they're trying to accomplish. And what I have found is sometimes that because there's so many different goals that we're trying to accomplish, really what we need to do is almost kind of like take a step backwards, maybe zoom from 10,000 feet out to 30,000 feet and look at this project from a higher level and identify that one high level goal. Is that something you come across often?
Yeah, absolutely. And we actually work, we have a really good relationship with a media buying company. And, they have this set of rules, and I don't know if we'll go into this or not. And I know you guys covered this earlier, but it's kind of like this analytics versus art, right? And I don't like to be like have rules for creativity, but I do think one really important rule, which a lot of media buying companies, they show that through analytics, one value proposition, focusing on one value proposition outperforms, a list of things that a brand tries to cover. If you can just convey your message in a simple way and just focus on one value prop, your content will perform a lot better. So I think that's like is pretty simple to just kind of follow and focus on that, and again, this kind of goes back to what we're going to cover later, but with like the hierarchy, if you really need to focus on more than one thing, can you create a production schedule and a shoot that then has different content that could focus on those other things, or could you do some A/B testing and like maybe you shoot 2 value props and you're testing those 2 spots against each other and seeing which kind of, which value prop hits harder with viewers and audiences, and then put the money behind that. But yeah, so I definitely see though, like brands trying to come and like say everything at once. They feel like this is their one time to like put it all out there. And another thing they do, especially in, the outdoor space is, or like probably any product space, but for me, it's the outdoor space is like, okay, cool. We're doing a trail running shoot. We need to shoot 10 shoes in one day. And you're like, there's just not enough time to do that. And you're going to have no story or edit. Like we just, you're not going to be able to show all those shoes in the edit, and you're not going to have enough shots to really make a cohesive edit. So it's like, I always like to be like, let's focus on like, male and female shoe. And then maybe we can try to put in like a couple different colors. But, ideally 2 to 3 shoes or products to be featured in an edit, I think is the best way to do it. So again, like simplifying the amount of product you're showing, just try to do one thing really well and have a really creative way of conveying that one message. And I think people will latch onto it a lot more.
Why is it that you think that many brands or folks, when they work with you guys, they'll come to you with a list of goals? Is it because they're trying to accomplish, everything with one project with you guys? Is it because, there's a bunch of different stakeholders internally within the project that are trying to make sure that they get their component communicated? Curious to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's a great question and something I wish I knew the answer to. But I think it is a lot of what you said. I think it is a lot of stakeholders, right? And everybody from every department, right, wants like this feature, focused on, or it's really important to them, like that. If it's like maybe a software thing, like, oh, we need to show like the chat feature, but in the big picture, like, does that really matter? And is that really going to sell your product? And then I also think it comes down to a lack of identifying a brand's voice, right? And I think this kind of goes back to analytics versus branding, or analytics versus art, maybe, like where really focus in on who you are as a brand and what you're trying to say, and then how does this value prop, let's say for this product, fit into that brand and your ethos. So I think it's a little lack of clarity, to be honest. I think if you have a lot to say, you really don't have much, you don't have much to say, or whatever that quote is. Like, I think you really need to just focus in on one key thing to share with everybody that then comes back to you like, hey, this is who we are as a brand and this is what we stand by. We're gonna show you that and we're gonna do it really, really well. So again, I know I'm repeating myself. I just think it's like a lack of kind of clarity within the brand of like where to go.
Gotcha. That makes
And I don't
sense.
think that means it's like a bad brand or whatnot, or I just see that a lot where it's here with a lot of younger brands, and it's like they're just so excited to like show everything about the product, But I think if you can create a like marketing strategy where eventually you'll get there, through different pieces of content, but I think always coming back to who you are as a brand and putting that through every single like value prop that you're trying to communicate to people will lead to a success and sell product and get like, kind of some brand loyalty as well.
So let's talk about some of the other elements you think are critical to a brief. We've been talking about kind of the goal, like the big idea. Obviously, that's maybe arguably the most important component. But if you just had to, go through a list of other aspects that you need from a brief in order to be successful, what are you looking for?
Okay, cool. I want to like skip the romance right away. And I'm like, how much money do you have? Like, I hate where we have to like do rounds and rounds of like budgets and they're like, oh, that's too high, or that's, and then if you like come in low, it doesn't work well either. So I'm like, right away, I'm just like, how much money do you have? And just be honest, like, cause it's always this awkward dance, but we just need to know where to shoot for, right? And what we can provide in your kind of range. So I don't want to like be pitching an idea that's, 100 plus when you have like $25,000, or vice versa. You might have these grandiose goals, but not have the budget to get it there. So I think if we're just transparent and be like, all right, this is how much we have, we can really work with you and be like, okay, cool. We can make something really cool, but maybe we have to cut like XYZ deliverables. Maybe you get a 60 and 230s out of this versus all the other cut downs or something like that. So I think budget is huge because that just immediately lets the production company know where to start and what they have to work with. So budget is huge. And then obviously timeline is really big. So just kind of knowing like, all right, when are these spots going live? And then we work backwards from there, right? So then we go through like our post schedule and then eventually get to our shoot days and whatnot. So timeline's really big.
And sorry, just to pause you really
Yeah,
quick.
yeah.
Would you say that those are some of like the three legs to kind of developing like a solid stool? Like if you're gonna make a brief, and we're using this analogy of a stool, would you say that budget, timeline, and the goal are maybe the three more important aspects to the brief?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think like even if that's all you had, I think that gives you a really good starting spot to figure out, what you need to do. So I think that's a great way to put it. That's like a great foundation to a good brief.
Cool. Okay. Sorry. Continue.
No, it's all good. So then another thing is we kind of have talked about this, but is deliverables and placement. So deliverables is huge because they just kind of add up in the edit, right? So that's going to chip away at that budget. But then what happens a lot within those deliverables is different aspect ratios. Are you doing social cut downs where you need like a 1:1 ratio? Because that might change how we actually might shoot it, right? Or in post, it's going to change how the graphics are. But if that's not known up front and it pops up at the end in the edit, it's just a huge headache. And then we're probably going to go over scope, or we're, eating costs to make people happy. But that all could have been figured out from just a really good brief. And then same thing with placement is really good. We've run into some issues where, maybe the brand doesn't quite know where the spot's gonna play. So we've worked out with talent agreements, okay, this is gonna be like linear or OTT, but then it pops up somewhere else, and then, casting companies are like, well, hey, like this showed up here, like we need X amount to pay the actors or talent or whatnot. So that's another important thing, is just figuring that out, because it all leads back to the budget, right? Which is one of those legs we talked about. And I like to have, obviously, like for me, it's like the more money I can have for the production and making things really cool is awesome. So then when you start having to cut away at the budget because of unseen things that just, kind of stinks. So I think that's really important. And then my favorite thing is examples, inspiration, and style. I mean, this is maybe for me more personal. I'm a very visual person. I used to be like a DP. So like, I really want to know like how the thing's gonna look, or what is important to your brand. Are you like really gritty, or are you kind of high key and more commercial? So I think knowing that, and then again, any sort of like, inspiration stuff from YouTube, Vimeo. I'm a huge inspiration person. I'm always like consuming content and finding inspiration for camera movement or lighting. So anything like that is like, even if it's like, a Nike spot, I think that's awesome to live up to. And we're like, cool, this is the goal. We want to try to make something like this. Or even if it's like, hey, we just like the camera movement in this. I just shot this spot for a software company, and we had been referencing a chime spot that had all this like probe lens and, just kind of all this really cool forward movement. And so we wanted to replicate that, and that really was honestly the foundation of that piece, because since it was a software company, it was kind of, stiff and rigid. We wanted to like kind of get out of that world and be moving the camera constantly. So that was like at the ethos of like everything for this spot was camera movement, how we get from like point A to point B. So that was huge. And then again, I think that goes into, your brand identity. Do you have a style that you can make sure goes through all of your content, or are we creating a style, or some sort of new vibe for the company? So all those things I think are really, really important. Who is the audience is another important. I don't know. For me personally, it's not that important, but like we have it on our briefs, I think it's good when you're going into like maybe casting and locations, right? You want your talent to represent people who you want to buy your product. Your location should also represent that as well. So I think that is really big. But again, for me as like a director, it's I pay attention to it, but it's not one of, I think, like the top ones, but it's on all of our foundations or on all of our briefs there. And I think that's kind of like the big ones I have. Cole, I know you've been having some interesting conversations, so I'm curious what's on your brief.
Yeah, I love what you have here. Yeah, and I think the audience is an aspect that maybe I just want to park on for a sec and think about, because I was thinking about how we develop great creative, and oftentimes it comes from insights about a particular demographic. And maybe the insight we have is that, these people who want to buy this fishing rod, maybe we know exactly what age group we're targeting because of, I don't know, this feature or this like colorway seems to really resonate with this audience. And so like, it is interesting how sometimes audience can be really important, and other times, yeah, as you said, sometimes it doesn't matter entirely. But I think it's very dependent upon the goal and the insight from which that goal was derived.
Cool. So yeah, I got an email from a brand the other day, and this was just a cold email. So we had no contact with this brand, but we were all internally pumped. And it was funny because when we had our meeting with the client, we were like, your email and your brief was amazing. We were so pumped. So, this email, right, it has basically like kind of who they are and what they're trying to do. So it says, and this is just like right away, like they just get to exactly what the ask is. And it says about us, and it has their name, it has the budget, it has the timeline, then it has the number of deliverables. So that's like just the first part of the email, right? They have a brief intro statement to like, hey, nice to meet you, whatever, we like your work. But then it just gets right to the point, which I love. And then they have the scope, and they talk about, having a variety of different needs that they need to create this year. And they're looking for, this was all consumer facing e-commerce videos. So we're looking for a partner that could execute this in their budget and all their different needs. And then they have examples and example of video projects. So they kind of like talk about having, and this can go to where we will go with like a hierarchy, but a longer anchor video, which they're talking about, which they wanted it to be educational focused. That would be on YouTube and paid social. And then they have supportive mid and bottom of funnel videos using same theme campaigns as the longer anchor video for YouTube and social, paid social. So right now I already like know like where everything's going, what the deliverables are and like kind of like what the point of these are. And then they have some more 15 seconds that are benefit focused motion graphic videos to be used on Amazon, paid social, YouTube as bottom of funnel activation. So like right now there's already like an awesome roadmap. And then they tell me this too. Then they tell me who would be involved in the project from their team with their titles and contact. And then it says looking forward to chatting. So I was like blown away. So we went into that call like already kind of knowing, what the ask was. And then we could just kind of talk about all the really cool shit that people want to talk about of like, how do we bring this to life and like, what's it going to look like? Because we've already gotten like all of the kind of nitty gritty out of the way.
Right. They've already set the table for you. Now you just get to figure out what you're putting on the table.
Right. And it's like, because that's what happens a lot too, right? If you're not briefed well, you do a bunch of phone calls and meetings, right? You're just going back and forth constantly. And it really does feel like this guessing game of like, well, is this what you want? No, we don't like that. Okay. Well, what are you looking for? I'm not sure yet, and it's just like, you kind of go back and forth and you're just wasting time and money. But like with that, it's like, we could get started today.
How important is it for you to understand the emotional takeaway from a project in a brief? Do clients often spell that out for you?
They don't. And that is awesome. Like that's like such an awesome point, Cole, because to me, that's like why we're in this. Even if it's like branded content and commercials, I think trying to hit people on like a human level or an emotional level is the end goal. That's how you make people connect. That's why I am a really big, believer in building a brand and giving a brand's message, and then like you'll sell product regardless if you can really connect with people. Like you don't need to be like, this is a shoe. This shoe makes you run faster. Like it's got laces. Like I think if like people know that, but if you can tell me like how it's gonna like connect with me as a human, or like you're gonna show me something that like makes me cry and like get goosebumps. I'm like pumped. So I really want to know that. I like absolutely want to know like that. Like what are we trying to like, how are we trying to connect to people at their core? And that kind of goes back to maybe that problem. What problem does this solve for people in their life? My team makes fun of me because I'm like a really sensitive person and I cry during Volvo commercials. And so I absolutely love Volvo's content. And I like have only owned Subarus my entire life. My like family always had Subarus. And I've just, like I said, I consume all this content. I was finding all these longer format things Volvo was doing, and they're like short narrative films, but then they also do a lot of cool documentary stuff. And I fell in love with the brand and started just like consuming everything. And then I ended up buying a Volvo this past year, an EV Volvo. And so, I know there was a new Volvo commercial just at the Oscars and at the Super Bowl, and my team was like, "Did you cry?" And I'm like, maybe a little bit. So, and I use those commercials now as like references a lot. Like, if I'm pitching to a brand, I'll have like that as like some inspiration in there, because I just love how they're shot and the stories they tell. So, personally, I think that's an awesome thing to have in a brief. Is like, at an emotional level, here's what we want this spot to do to people, or this is what we're hoping this product can do for people. I love that. I'm actually going to add that to my briefs. Thanks, Cole.
Yeah, no worries. I think that honestly comes back to this idea of like the audience. Like if we're trying to hit someone with a particular emotion, like we need to know who we're talking to. Are these moms or dads, or is this a trail runner? Like the demographic could be very skewed, or it could be very nuanced or very different. But it's like a lot of the creative decisions that you make in the scripting phase, or when you're writing, or even when you're on set and directing talent, it's like it's all who are we trying to talk to, and how am I trying to figure out how to make this piece come together to deliver this emotion to this particular person.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, I'm like working on this challenge right now for a credit union, and they're comedy spots, but the product that this credit union is selling is you have to have like basically in deposit 250K just to open this one type of like CD, so it's like comedy, but it's not like it can't be slapstick, right? Because we're speaking to like a different demographic. So it's kind of funny. It's like I'm really focusing on right now, like what are the deliveries for these actors? They can't be too goofy, but you still need to like have some humor come across. So, probably playing it a little more straightforward and just kind of like the actions they're going to be doing is where the comedy will be. But it definitely makes a lot of decisions on set of like, what is the tone or what are we trying to like make people feel. So
And that's where your skill as a director comes in, is you have to like kind of take all of this business jargon and these business goals and then combine it with the creative and then figure out how to actually bring that together. And it's an impressive thing to watch when a talented director steps on set and makes it all come together. But as we're finding out, it takes a lot of legwork before that.
Yep, absolutely. Yep. And I mean, I think that's huge. Like I think a lot of people think like directors or maybe even production companies, right? It's like, oh, they are just executing or, like guys with cameras, right? But there's so much more into it. There's so much like pre-production is huge. If you're not, for me, like when I'm on set, it should be easy. Like set for me doesn't stress me out at all because I'm prepped. I've been briefed. I've like gone through the brief, right? We've done everything we need in pre-pro. So then that like, it's kind of like you're just then like set is just going through the motions, or maybe that's a bad term, but like you're not worried about it because you know exactly how this thing's going to unfold because you're prepared and you've been briefed well.
Didn't Alfred Hitchcock say something like that? He's like, by the time I get to set, I'm bored because I've already made the film in my head.
Yeah, I'm probably, and maybe. I'm a huge Alfred Hitchcock fan. I took Hitchcock in my senior year of college. It was the best class ever. So.
He's he's an interesting guy. There was a while where I was on a real kick where I was watching all of his old films, and this is totally off topic, but I think it's The Man in the Window or something. Like the entire film is shot from one room.
Yeah.
And it's
Rope.
Maybe that's not the title of it.
It's Rope. It's all like in just one setting.
Yeah. It was amazing.
Yeah.
I was like, how this is so creative. Like you came up with so many shots in one room. Like I could come up with 3 and I'd be tapped out.
I know. We like, I always still, I don't know if you know this term, the MacGuffin. Like
no.
Hitchcock had this, they called it the MacGuffin, where like there was always just like a close up or an insert of something, right? So like, maybe they're just cut to like this AirPod case that I'm holding, and you wouldn't know what it is. But then like later it was like, that was the clue to the murder, And so I always like to be like, can we work on MacGuffin in here later? Like where it's some little shot that will then play bigger later.
I like that. Yeah. So just to recap, we've been talking about all the elements of the brief, and just to run through them. So we've got the goal, budget, timeline, the deliverables, placement, aspect ratios, sample work, inspiration, the audience, maybe the emotional, the emotional result that you want to create. It sounds like a lot of elements to go into something like this, but as we've discussed, like it's pretty crucial for these things to be developed in order for you guys to do your job really well. What would you say, we've kind of been talking about this, but what would you say some of the biggest challenges are when clients are trying to put all of this together? Do they need someone like you guys to help them walk through this process? Like what are some common roadblocks maybe?
I think some common roadblocks are like when you're really vague, it's like they don't know, a lot of times they're just like, we just don't really know the answers to these. And so that's hard. And so, yeah, it's like kind of like sitting through them and you're asking a lot of questions. And I try to show them stuff a lot of times, to get around. I'm like, okay, based off some of our conversations, like maybe we could go in this direction. And here's a bunch of examples of what that might look like, and do any of these resonate, and then they start picking things that they like. It's almost like a la carte, and they're like, okay, I like this from that video. I like this from that piece. I really liked the, you know, the casting out of this video. So then we're like, okay, cool. That's starting to kind of paint the picture a little bit more. But I think like if you don't know if you're struggling answering the brief, I would use the brief as like a branding exercise, right? And sit down with like your key stakeholders and start to figure out like who are we and what do we want to say, and just kind of use that as an outline to, you know, figure out like what you stand for or what you're trying to communicate to people.
I think what you said makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Sometimes
Okay.
it's just taking the time to sit down and put some thought into it.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's it. It's really just like, I go back to what I said. I just feel like a lot of people or a lot of brands is like, and maybe this is because of like marketing dollars as well. It's just like we need to make a commercial, you know, or we need to make content and get this out the door. But it's been kind of like, you know, some half-baked concept that's not fully there yet, you know, or it's just kind of like, you know, here's the skeleton of it, and we need to figure out what the rest of it is.
Yeah. I want to, that makes a ton of sense. I want to transition a little bit and just talk about deliverables. And you mentioned earlier, and I really appreciate this perspective, I'm curious to hear more. You said, you know, sometimes clients, again, like have multiple goals, but in order for a brief to be successful, you need to know that one big idea. But as you said, oftentimes where you can actually start to accomplish more of those secondary goals for a project is through additional deliverables. I'm curious, like I think this is fairly common. Like the ask is generally, you know, can we get a hero video plus some cut downs? But maybe I'm curious if you can kind of lay out like what are ways that you guys propose different deliverables to accomplish, you know, those secondary goals that maybe isn't the most important thing, but it's something you guys certainly want to check off the list.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so like you said, right? Like if you have like your long form piece, right, that kind of sits at top, and then everything's going to be kind of picked down or funneled down from that. And I think that's where you can do your brand building. That's the sexy piece, right? That's the piece that goes on the reel. That's why we're all there, really. but but then having your 30-second cut downs from there. Let's just say like that hero piece is a 60, right? Then having your 30-second cut downs, and I like to, again, working with some of these ad buying companies and whatnot, media buyers, like I think anything you can test and get that data on and see what performs is good. So but all it has to be like in the confinements that it's doable in that shoot, right? Maybe it's as simple as an end card swapping out and what the CTA is or something like that. You know, or maybe it's like you know, maybe this one's way more focused on the product, where this one feels a little more lifestyle, and we see what does better, because you're going to have those shots anyway. But I think if you have your 30-second cut downs, it's kind of like going down, let's say like the left side 30-second, like that's staying on that brand focused messaging, where then maybe the right side of like this kind of like diagram, that 30-second is product focused, right? So they're sitting across and you can like A/B test, but use them on different platforms. So one is being like true to like, hey, we're cool, this is why we're cool. And this one's like, we're just here to sell shoes, you know, buy our shoes. And then those funnel down from the 15s, right? So you keep focused on the 15s, like that's brand, that's kind of more schlepping product. But then those can even umbrella more, where it's like, that's where I think you can get into like, this is where we could show some other SKUs, you know? So it's like, all right, maybe we have like the red shoe, the female shoe, the male blue shoe, and those are just selling products, and we're gonna, you know, like just start to like build out that more. And those are 15 seconds. Those are really quick, and you could do those with 6s. But like one thing too, I think that people don't do enough of is we do these shoots, and there's, I mean, hours of footage, terabytes of content, and that's all it like, you know, gets made into those edits and then never sees the light of day. I'm like, you have so much content, like get the drive from the production company and go through all that footage and use that stuff for your Instagram stories, or, you know, quick little like hitting posts, you know, like I shot some stuff for a brand a year ago. We got this awesome shot with Payson McElvin on a gravel bike in Sedona, Arizona. And like, it's just this beautiful long take at sunrise in Sedona. And I mean, he's just like mocking. I mean, he's pushing like, I think he said like 800 watts in this shot and like just going. And like, we're on a parallel road just ripping on a long lens. I mean, I was like freaking out in the back how cool it looked. And then it shows up for like, you know, a second in the edit. But I'm like, you could just like literally make that one shot like some sort of post, right? And then just cut to your like logo at the end. You know, so I think just leveraging that content for all your social needs, you know, your Instagram stories or whatever it could be, it's something that I just don't think a lot of people do, or I'm not seeing, at least on the stuff I'm using. Like, you guys own that content, like use it, you know? Like dig through it, know it, where you can then like make maybe other edits down the road with it. So I think that's like a really big opportunity that I would love to see more of.
Well, Evan, we've talked about a lot. I think this has been a very, very fruitful and very, it's just been an insightful conversation, I think, to better understand kind of your process and the things that you need to be successful. Do you feel like, as a general statement, is the industry getting, this is poorly worded, but are we getting better at equipping people like you, or do you find that you're getting more poorly equipped with each brief that comes through the door?
I think it's TBD. I think it's like, it's literally all over the place. You know what I mean? Like, I find that agency work is more dialed in, but I think that makes sense. That's their job. So I think the work to be done is on the direct to brand. So I think it just kind of ebbs and flows, right? It's just like everything else. Like, sometimes you get a really great brief in the door and then other times you don't. But then also, like, there's also huge opportunity in a loose brief, I think, because as a, you know, production company, director, filmmaker, whatever you want to call yourself, like, I think a loose brief means that they need help and they're looking to you to kind of guide them and steer them in the right direction. And so I've been lately doing a ton of direct to brand work, and it's been a lot of like creative freedom and kind of pushing, like, maybe selfishly, like what I want to do. But, you know, brands have been open to it if you're basically saying like, this is why this will work. And, you know, they're looking to you for your expertise. So I think lean into that and you can make some really cool stuff.
Yeah, well said. If you had to sum up this conversation for folks, kind of give them some key takeaways to consider. Again, this is the last conversation in this series. We've covered a lot, but this is the point kind of where we all get to jump off and go out and make the thing that we've been planning for. So drive it home for us, Evan.
Well, the pressure's on now. I would say, what's the point? Like, what's the point of this video? That's it. Like, what are you trying to get people to do? And then know how much and communicate you have to spend on it. Don't be afraid to create multiple edits to A/B test. I think our analytics people in the previous episodes will love that. And then don't be afraid also to like leverage that content. Like, use every little bit of that shoot to put your voice, your message, your brand out there, whether it's social stories or whatnot. But I think when you're onboarding a production company, be prepared, you know exactly what you want out of this. You're spending a lot of money, so make it worth it.
Beautiful. Be prepared. I love that. You just summed up the entire series right there. Evan, I want to thank you for your time and sharing some of your insights with us. If folks want to follow along with you or with Lumenati, where can they go? Also, can they just drop in and get a tattoo in the warehouse? Like, how's that work?
Yeah, absolutely. We have actually we have Flash Fridays, so we do flash tattoos every Friday. So swing in. Or check out Lumenati Tattoo on Instagram and hit up one of the artists of your choice. But you can follow Lumenati at Lumenati is the Instagram handle, and mine is at Swiney, so SWINEY on Instagram. But yeah.
Amazing. All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. This has been a lot of fun, and I'm excited to see what you guys create in the future. Sounds like you've got some fun projects on deck, and we should stay tuned.
Awesome. Thanks, Philip. It's been awesome. Appreciate your time, man.
Yeah, no worries. Take care.
Bye.